Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Post your alien pics and stories. Legit sighting and abduction story here, don't care if you believe me or not. We'll answer follow-up questions. 2008, I live in a small city in one of the corners of Australia. House is just outside said city in a suburb a few kilometers away, overlooking a river. Small but fairly populated area. Arlington in July or August. I'm 14 years old at the time. At home. It's getting close to dinner time when I get called upstairs by my father, who is standing just outside the front of the house. My stepmother and stepsister are also present. I get outside, and hovering probably 2 or 3 kilometers away are 3 brilliant bright orange lights. They rotate slowly above the river beach near the town, completely silent, making a rotating triangle shape. It's about 7 p.m. at night, so there's very ambient noise in the area. Whatever it wasn't making any noise. They hovered and rotated for the best part of 15 minutes, occasionally dimming and reappearing, until finally they disappeared completely. It wasn't a flare or a helicopter, and there are no military airfields in the entire state. I'm not sure what it was, but I'm not entirely convinced it wasn't something otherworldly. A few years later, probably late 2011, maybe October or November, I undergo a number of experiences culminating in a waking abduction. I'll go straight to the most striking event, and if there's any interest, I might share more. It's probably around November 2011 that this occurred, though the date could be as late as mid-2012. By this time, I'm 18 or 19 years old, and have been having strange nightmares about small gray creatures entering my bedroom and electrocuting me with a small silver rod. These nightmarish experiences had seemingly been increasing in frequency and vividness, sometimes leaving behind strange odors like rotting cardboard once, even when I'd been moved and woke up on the floor. Needless to say, at this point, I was already pretty spooked by the prospect that the nightmares were actually real, though I wasn't entirely convinced, and still aren't to this day. The night in question, I was awoken by some outside disturbance. I don't remember the specific sound that roused me, but I have the distinct memory of being irritated or fed up by whatever it was. My room was unusually well lit at the time, something I strangely overlooked. It was as though a car was parked in my backyard with the headlights on. It was an unnatural white light that was coming through the curtains. I'm just lying there and I notice my door slowly slipping open. Fed up, I jump out of bed and pull the door open violently. There, standing in the hallway just outside my room, are 3 small beings, maybe 130 or 150 centimeters in height, completely bald with round, black eyes. It's very dark, so I can't make out all the features. Almost instantly, I feel the most incredible fear I've ever felt. It's like a cold bucket of water being poured over me. Terror doesn't even begin to describe it. It's cold. Animalistic fear, I react and go to hit one of them. The next thing I remember is something hitting my head, a loud crack and the feeling of electrocution again. I wake up the next morning, feel unwell and vomit in the shower. More importantly, I notice a small marking on my back, round, with 3 clear strikes through the middle, bit like a pace symbol. The marking itself bear resemblance to a hickey, in the sense that it seemed like something had sucked on my skin and brought the blood to the surface. It didn't disappear for several days. If there's any interest, I may root around and have a look for the photos I took of it at the time. Understandably, one of the scariest experiences of my life. I don't remember much else about the abduction, just the violent and sudden way I was taken. Here's an image of the marking I found on my back the following morning, after the encounter with the Greys. Thinking about it, there doesn't seem to be any causal explanation that could have caused the mark. It was literally like a suction tube had been applied to my skin. It stayed for several days before fading. I had additional encounters with them, albeit to a lesser degree of intensity. The commonality between the encounters is their use of a small metal rod to subdue me. Thin, silver and pointed, likely the size of a chopstick. Right before I'd lose consciousness in any of these experiences, I'd hear a loud crack noise. It's a strange and unnatural noise, and it sounds almost as if it's happening within your sinus or forehead. emanating from the point at which they strike with the rod, which is somewhere just between and above your eyebrows. The noise and unconsciousness is sometimes followed with the feeling of electrocution, which starts inside your head and spreads through your entire body. The terror of an abduction is absolutely incredible. I'm not surprised most people don't remember it. The mind protecting itself, perhaps.
The nightmares began in the year 2000. I was 10 years old, and for the next 3 years of my life I developed depression and anxiety. The stress from the dreams caused me to sit in class and jot down the faces in my notebooks. I could never get the bodies right. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My night terrors seemed to give me some kind of post-traumatic stress. I've had so many vivid dreams where I was being dragged around a spaceship by one of these things. There was never any remorse. I almost feel like these creatures don't understand human emotion, or that they are just robots. What I do remember is that each dream had a theme. It started with UFO sighting-style nightmares, which were easy to deal with because I could wake up after the sighting, but as it progressed the world began to end. At one point I started having sleep paralysis, and they would show up in my room from a light then appear wherever they want, like pretty much walk through walls. I could never move, and I could never scream. My heart would feel like it was going to explode from my chest, and within seconds it was all over. I believe that I am an abductee because when my nightmares began there was a UFO that the police chased in a few towns from me until it disappeared. That event happened in 2000, and I didn't know about it until I was 13.
My father has a story. Profile, Brazilian, about 30 years old, working in a supermarket, 1990s. City, Franca, Sao Paulo. After his working shift, my father stopped by a bar to crack open a cold one with the boys. Ask for a beer, sit at a table by the sidewalk. See a couple of people on the sidewalk on the other side of the street. Suddenly feels an urge to cross the street and talk to them. He doesn't even start to drink. It was a man and a woman. He described them as dressing like those Arab people or maybe gypsies. He asked them, "I don't know why, but I have a feeling that I know you from someplace." They smile without saying a word. Memory blank. Found himself in some place else, some kind of abandoned and empty lot. It is foggy. The couple asked him, "Come with us." He says, "I can't, I have a son and a wife." They give their back to him and walk into the fog, disappearing. My father realizes where he is. He is not far from home, almost the same block, but he is very far from where he was before. He realizes that the place the couple walked towards is a wall. There is no other exit. He comes back home, running and sweating. Hours passed and he doesn't recall a thing. Is it legit? Are there similar stories? My father is not the lying type, and he is always dead serious while mentioning it. And he remembers this story from time to time.
Sister had a similar story, but way less intense, no abduction. She was at the shopping center. It was late at night, just before closing, so no other people were around. While taking the escalator up and being in the middle, there was a young man in the other direction coming towards her. She said she can't remember his face or anything else about his appearance, just the super intense eyes staring at her. Then he said the exact same thing as to your father. "Come with us." She instantly got unnaturally scared, letting him pass her on the escalator. It was just a second, but when she turns back, no one is standing there anymore, nor is anyone around downstairs, anywhere. I did some research and found stories about the "Come with us." Does anyone know more?
North Italian mountaineers from a village in the Venetian Alps. I see some resemblances with a legend here of the Cassiomorta, the dead hunter. It's a legend of a strange pale man dressed as a hunter that forced people to follow him in the forest or in some mountain grottos, and they usually never return, and not a single one of them was found. All missing people in the past were thought to have followed him. There have also been strange globular lights in these mountains for centuries.
Out of all the different kinds of close encounters, it's the insectoids that interest me the most. Have any of you experienced or read about one like this? Be me in 2009. Because of a crap economy and depression, I have to move back in with my parents. Since I'm not paying rent, they put me in charge of watching my sister. She's in middle school and hanging out with a rough crowd. One night I caught her sneaking out. She gets pissed at me and runs off to the wooded area by our subdivision. I go after her, but she's faster than me. I see her dip into the woods before I can get to her. I spend the better part of an hour looking for her, until by chance the light from my flashlight catches her back. At this point I'm tired, cold, and pissed, so I march up to her to chew her out. When I'm about to grab her shoulder, I noticed a green light about 20 yards ahead of us. It takes a few seconds, but I can see it's a small ball of green light and it looks like a figure is holding it. I put a hand on my sister's shoulder and she instantly started screaming. It was like when you wake up someone from a nightmare. While she's panicking, the light grows and I can see the figure better. It's tall but hunched over. It had a shimmering brown exoskeleton, jagged mandibles, and multiple writhing limbs and a head that looked like a giant beetle's. My sister was the first one to turn and run, and I was behind her. In about 30 minutes we ran our way back home and locked it up. We spent the rest of the night in a panic at what we saw. Everything after that was uneventful. We didn't tell our parents anything about it. Things just moved on like nothing happened. But we did steer clear of the woods, and my sister refuses to go out after dark even to this day. I used to ask her what we saw, but every time she would get angry and shut the conversation down. A few years after our encounter, I fell down the alien rabbit hole and learned about insectoids. I believe that's what we saw back then.
When I was a kid, I experienced weird alien abductions. It started with a black, shadowy-looking figure. It first appeared in front of me one night around midnight in the kitchen of my childhood home from what was the back room, a weird room that was next to my mom's bedroom that had a cement floor and was just used for storage. Anyway, I know that the first event happened because the fridge was still open the following morning. I used to think it was a shadow figure or ghost or something, except I experienced it looking down at me in my bed on another occasion inches from my face. It wasn't until years later that I realized it wasn't a shadow I saw, but I don't know how to describe it, sort of like an alien gray is normally depicted, but different. I remember one event where I was in a strange place. It was like a very clean-looking place with clean halls and rooms, lots of rooms. Except it wasn't pleasant, there was just screaming, lots of screaming. Behind one door I was led through was my mom, who was screaming in agony. I had been dismissing all of this for years because it just seems insane, but I was talking to my mother and discovered that she remembers what I thought was a nightmare, and told me how she's experienced weird things her entire life, seeing UFOs, etc. One night in the 80s she was doing laundry late at night and was going back to her apartment. There was a bright flash and then nothing. She just came to hours later without any clear memories of what happened or why. Sometimes I wake up and my room is a mess, like a struggle was going on, but I don't ever remember anything but sleeping, not even any dreams or nightmares. Rarely I do have dreams. Often whenever I do, they involve weird events like being in my house going through a normal night, but then a bright white light appears and just nothing. I have more I can go into if anyone cares to hear it, but has anyone had anything similar? What do I even make of this and everything? Well, the very first event I can remember, I was sitting in my bedroom looking outside. I saw this bright red object in the sky, kinda rapidly flying around. Looking back on it, it made no sense. When I was 6 or 8 years old, I had a specific nightmare that never changed. I was in the middle of my room. It was empty except for a wooden toy chest I had, but it was in the corner. On top of the toy chest was what looked like a stereotypical angel, blonde hair, white dress. The doorways and windows were all pitch black, and in the dream I would slowly be drawn towards it. Its lips would be moving and no sound coming out. I would always wake up screaming before I reached it, but one time specifically I woke up to what I first remembered as that black shadow above me looking down. There was one time my mom and I left one night to go out with family. We lived alone, by the way. When we came back, the entire house was torn up, no signs of forced entry, nothing taken. My room was the most bizarre, as it had a plant moved and set on top of a table beside the TV. It was so strange, and nothing came of it when the police came. All kinds of strange things went on in that house, objects being thrown, voices, and strangely, when I was about 6, I was looking from my mom's bed into the living room. I saw this clock on the wall, except it turned into a face and started morphing into different faces. I never understood that, or well, any of this. Going back to what I would say is certainly more alien than just paranormal. I remember a weird sound it's hard to put into words. Like a metallic pulsing sound that would come from outside above the house. The dogs would always freak out whenever it would happen, and I always felt panicked when it did too. I've had strange dreams about aliens over the years, when I dream or at least remember them. One time they had invaded the Earth and were basically unkillable. They were just everywhere. All you could do was run. There's a lot, but it's hard to really put it into a consistent timeline, because honestly there's so much. The times I remember seeing them, it was weird. Sometimes I wasn't exactly afraid, but I also wasn't anywhere near remotely comfortable. When they looked at me, it was like they could see inside me, if that makes any sense. Unnerving is a way I would put it.
Does this still happen? Do you feel like they are coming or something?
It certainly still happens. I hear that noise every so often. I don't know if it would be of any relation, but I've suffered with chronic illnesses and strange things in general all my life. Most recently, I had a rare type of cancer develop in my right thigh. I also get constant severe migraines. There's a lot I know I don't remember. In fact, I know there's at least 20 years of memories that are just not there. Sometimes little fragments come through like the screaming. The sounds of screaming are burned into my memory. I do also have a constant feeling like they are coming. And weirdly, I have days that I know I've lived before, even knowing what is going to happen outside anything I can know hours before they occur. It's confusing. I keep expecting something to happen, if that makes any sense, like knowing something big is coming, but not when, just something.
I hate to do this, but I feel an old feeling of growing irritation. I'm beginning to attempt to more fully reconcile my childhood, and that means not focusing so much on more mechanistic explanations. Yesterday, I had reached my peak. Pain was under control. My mind was not only sharpened and usable, but something approaching clear. I had drank a decent amount of caffeine, but nothing abnormal. I began to become sleepy and eventually entered a state of fatigue. I lay down on the floor, planning to briefly rest, and immediately fell into a deep sleep. In a half-aware state, I then felt a force like something is wrenching my jaw around. I wake up an unknown amount of time later, look around, and I'm in that goddamn state again. I can't quite understand what I'm looking at. Nothing feels quite right. I don't know where or who I am. I know these things, but there's something wrong. Upon waking, I got up, didn't really know quite where I was. I go to the window, not to see the state of the expected, but to see what was there outright. My mind feels like mud inside, the pain is back and intense, and I can't barely draw from memory, much less construct coherent sentences. I used to think something was tampering with my mind in my sleep, and could put me to sleep to do it. Many things led me to this rough idea. Seeing moving shapes like distortion patterns where light doesn't quite seem to behave correctly. Could it be a cloak? Seeing red lights and flashes from outside my door as a child. Falling asleep and suddenly hearing something scream in my ear, "Wake up!" I shot up with my ear ringing. Then there was the recurring dreams of a woman with orange eyes, and I even saw her when I was awake. She appeared in many forms. I could feel her standing or moving around me. Sometimes she tried to entice me. Sometimes she was motherly, sometimes detached. I felt limbs reach through my body, and as though something was trying to force its way into my head. The truly unnerving part was that I felt a small something already within, trying to open the gates in response. Eventually, I stopped having it happen. Did she finally succeed? Did she become part of me? Was she part of me all along? Did she or it take what it wanted and leave? Maybe wipe my memory of something, maybe planted something. I don't know, and I know I can't know. I always woke up feeling dumber, robbed, stripped of even the most minute progress in anything, and I thought I fixed it, or it fixed itself. But I was wrong. This still happens, and it always happens within the same sequence of events. Likewise, I have found clusters of memory in my head that are walled off. I can feel them there, but any attempt to access doesn't work. Trying to force my way in results in everything, in an instant, yanked out of short-term, working memory, and I am rendered blank. Then all of my emotions reverse. Could I be followed by something? I am able to explain a lot of this neurologically, but I'm not satisfied. I can see correlations with stress and types of anxiety, but it's not good enough. I've seen and had too many strange things happen to me. I'm a bit of a whack job anyway, so a mechanical basis within the brain is not out of the question, but I'd like to investigate all avenues. There is more to be said and better, but I just can't remember. A caffeine crash is not abnormal, but there's something wrong here. Feel brain dead. Transcranial magnetic stimulation comes to mind. Well, never mind. I think I'm just addled. My brain doesn't handle caffeine well. It can probably be described neurologically. I probably have some degree of hypermetabolism in the left lingual gyrus and right anterior cerebellum, and I don't know what sort of multi-system deal that would create. I'm just tired of feeling stolen from. I had it. Now it's gone. It's all gone. Makes you want to just jump off the bridge. I don't want to rebuild again. I don't want to know I'll have to do it again. I don't want this raw pain in my entire body. I had it. If I find this goddamn being, I have too many ideas for what and why.
Have any of you guys ever had sudden personality changes after alien abductions or encounters? Maybe right after a really strange dream or the like.
I've had an experience when I was a kid, but it could have been a dream. Be kid, probably around 6 or 7, in bed because that's where I sleep. Have this sudden, only lasted for a few moments, nightmare that was unlike anything I have ever seen. Right as I drift off to sleep, I become aware. My body is in sleep paralysis of some form, felt a little off from normal sleep paralysis. A scream emanated from myself, though it did not necessarily come from my mouth. Everything is shaking, like my body and eustachian tubes are vibrating, making the ear rumble noise. The environment is a grayscale, bright white room with a window. The window is pitch black as it peers off outside. I must have been laying down on an operating table, but the room was empty and there was no equipment that I remember seeing. If an abduction, could have just been a med bay where aliens may have given me a checkup. If that's true, my young mind didn't understand what was going on and was terrified. Silently wish it happens again so I can experience it with my current, more developed and adult mind. It's as if someone put a G-mod color filter over my eyes. Wake up, tell my parents, they told me it was a bad dream. Don't think about it much till alien stuff starts popping up in current time. Pic related is the scene drawn in MS Paint. Sounds similar to anyone? I've never typed out this experience before, but I tried to get the details right to the best of my ability. It stuck with me all these years, 20 now, because it was pretty traumatizing. Could have just been a regular nightmare and that I'm stupid, but I want to know what you guys make of this.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.